Hello, I'm David Knox. Enjoy this complimentary full video from our online training library. Welcome to Real Estate Live number 56, Part 2, Commission Conversations, Seller Compensation Offers. In this video, you'll hear how these agents present the importance of offering buyer-agent compensation. And the theme, as you will see, is to focus on what is in the best interest of your sellers.
This is Rhonda Chamble in Dayton, Ohio. I've had great success with getting sellers to offer compensation to buyer's agents. One of the first things we discuss at a listing appointment is that my job as their agent is to get the most number of buyers to their property so that they get the best terms and the highest price. If the seller opts not to provide any compensation, that's immediately going to limit that pool of buyers. That's because the buyer has to bring money for a closing cost, a down payment, inspections, and an appraisal. If they're also faced with potentially having to compensate their agent, many buyers are going to be concerned that they just don't have that amount of money, and they may not even want to see the property. So the solution is for the seller to offer compensation to the other agent, and then we'll have a successful transaction.
Most of the sellers I've worked with have totally understood that a buyer agent is going to need to be paid and that they're willing to offer compensation for bringing the buyers not just to their house, obviously, but to the closing. So for a successful closing, they've been willing to pay a cooperation fee that feels very reasonable and respectful of the other side and the effort that goes into selling a house. So far, I haven't had any trouble or any sellers saying they wouldn't. They seem to appreciate the fact that the expense remains on their side, and that if they don't want to offer that fee, it's probably going to show up in the purchase and sales agreement or be reflected in terms of the offer that's being made. And it doesn't seem that any of my sellers, the new ones or the old ones, have any interest in changing the policy of paying a buyer agent for their services. I think they like the fact that the expense is on their side and that they get to kind of control what that is. What the buyer agent decides to get paid is whatever they decide to get paid, but what the sellers decide to offer, it makes them feel more in control.
Traditionally, when sitting down with the seller, I would be discussing what my fee is as a listing agent as well as that of the buyer's agent. And now, honestly, that conversation has gotten a lot more easier because all we're discussing is my fee. And it would go something like this. Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I'm very excited to be helping you with the sale of your home, helping you sell this for the top dollar in the quickest time frame possible at the terms that are most favorable to you. It's important to understand that there have been some changes in the real estate industry post-August 17th, and you no longer have a legal obligation to pay your buyer's agent, just like you did not before. But now it's gotten to the point where it's not even written anywhere in the legal terminology and in the contract we'll be signing. So what does that mean for you as a seller? Does that mean you won't be paying anything? Not necessarily. It's important to understand the price point we find ourselves in here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, where the average price point for a single-family residence is anywhere from $1.5 to $3 million plus. That's a pretty hefty commission check. So to ask the buyer to cover their down payment, their closing cost, as well as this new commission, that's a pretty hefty amount. So you will see some offers that come in that are asking for the buyer's agent's compensation to be covered, but what that compensation amount is, we don't know, and we won't know until we get the offers. So my job is, of course, to help you sell this property at the best price possible, at the best terms possible, in the quickest time frame possible, at the terms that are most agreeable to you. So when they come in, we'll analyze them, and whichever one you think is going to be the best is the one we're going to go with.
My name is Jennifer, and I am an agent with Minnesota Real Estate Team. I would say working with the sellers, I'm explaining to them why I think it's still in their best benefit to offer compensation to our buyers agents. And I have not had anyone not agree to pay the buyer's agent. So that is working out just fine. And all in all, I would say it's not really a big deal. And I'm just kind of doing my business as usual, just taking a couple extra steps to make sure I'm staying compliant.
My name is Judy Alvis, and my brokerage is in Scottsdale, Arizona. I recently had a challenging listing appointment. He told me he had some friends who had used a brokerage in the past and with success, and wanted to see if I could reduce my fees. With that information, I was more prepared for our in-person meeting. I practiced in advance what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. I let him know that he could make his own decision as to what he wanted to pay the buyer broker, and that also it was a negotiable item in the new purchase contract. I then educated him on the current state of our Arizona real estate market. He wanted to pay a buyer broker compensation.
And for our sellers, we are making it very clear with them that there is a minimum compensation that we will offer in our listing to the buyer's agent. If they're not willing to do that, we know that it's going to affect and impede their ability to sell that house and get top dollar for it. In fact, from my perspective, if they aren't offering the compensation that they would normally have offered prior to August 17th, then they should be reducing the price of the house because there is less value there in the total transaction. And none of them are willing to accept that concept. So we are just setting a minimum, and that is our business policy on my team. That will potentially mean that we won't be working with certain people, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, recently I was working with a seller who had the misunderstanding that if we worked with a buyer who was unrepresented, that there would not be a buyer's side fee. We had a good discussion about that because they didn't quite realize that working with a buyer took a lot to get from point A to point B, B being the closing and A being them choosing this particular house to make the offer, have the home inspection, go through financing, and all the little nuances that a real estate agent has to do. And in this case, I was doing it as the seller's agent, who was my client, and the buyer being the customer. It was actually to their advantage to have someone who is their agent working with the buyer so that we could put together an offer that was acceptable. And in addition to that, really know what was going on throughout the whole transaction. You know, there's also a little bit of an additional liability there because you don't want the buyer to have an implied agency with you. So you really take your time to cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure that they realize that the sellers are your clients and you're their eyes and ears. And in this particular case, it was really helpful for the sellers to hear that. I think it was repeated more than once before they understood the concept that, you know, sellers are the clients and buyers, in this case, was the customer. They appreciated the fact that there was professionalism the whole way from start to finish, and that deserved the buyer side fee.
As you saw near the end, Vicki Westover takes a firm policy position on having her sellers offer compensation. So remember, you have the right to run your business in any way that is beneficial to your clients and profitable to you. Now, the next segment presents two key skills: delaying the compensation offer until the purchase agreement and managing seller expectations with an NetSheet. If you are a broker or manager and would like more content like this for your training and sales meetings, click the links below to sign up. Subscriptions start at $267 a month for up to 25 agents.